Like I knew it's what happens. 2 PhDs on stage. See, that's kind of intimidating. And maybe more so than the amount of money that you guys have at your disposal.
No need to worry.
The hardest part about this is, right, where do we begin? Do we begin with all of the entrepreneurs in the room that are going, what's it going to take for Andreas to write me a check? Or do we begin with Hari and the holy cow, you just have $500 million question? Where are we going to start?
It's up to you. I should say thank you all for coming and thanks for having us. This is a little bit bigger than the classes I normally teach at MIT.
Well, so could I call you professor? Should we? Like if we see you in the hallway, should we say professor? Is that what you prefer?
As long as not an insult, sure.
Okay. But how many entrepreneurs are still, you're still a full-time professor?
Yes.
Okay. See, that's amazing. All right. Well, I could geek out on that clearly as much. Okay. So we're going to start? No? Okay. Who's going to begin? Andreas, you want to decide?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, right, on the whole topic of, why, should people really be excited about, our investments in CMT and, how can they draw from that and, what are the things that they should be thinking about? I think there are really a few key things to highlight, right? So we're ultimately a growth stage investor, as you all know. And the things that really drew us to CMT was, number one, the scale they have and the fact that it's a proven product and proven commercial value that you can really put the foot on the gas. Number two, it's a product that is sufficiently affordable that it truly, truly does scale across a lot of applications. And number three, and I think this is the most important part, is the partnerships, right? So insurance, by its very nature, is a risk-averse business. And I think being able to win, certain partnerships is going to be hard work. It's going to take a long time.
I don't think anyone in this room would agree with you that insurance is a risk-averse. Insurers are risk-averse. Yeah. Well, you mentioned, sort of product. So it's probably a good point. As much as I assume that every single person in this room knows about you, it's probably not actually the case.
Yeah.
So Hari, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about sort of CMT.
So CMT's mission is to make the world's roads and drivers safer. And the way we do that is using a combination of mobile sensing, statistics, artificial intelligence, and behavioral science. So the product's actually pretty simple. It's a platform we call DriveWell. What it does is allows insurers or ride-hailing companies or anyone interested in building applications with mobile sensing to leverage the sensors on your smartphones. And we also have an optional IoT device that attaches to the windshield. It's an option, not required. And use that data to understand how safely people drive. So that helps in pricing insurance policies with telematics. The second part of it, which we invest a lot in and work with our partners, we work with about 35 insurers in 25 countries today, and that's growing as well. We work with them to use behavioral science to provide a lot of different incentives for people to become better drivers, so that improves your loss ratio. Over the last year and a half, we've also invested heavily in a product we call Claims Studio, which is really an exciting product, suite of solutions that allow you to have components that can take telematics and AI and improve the claims process. So that's what we do, and really we're very mission focused in terms of focusing on how we can make the world's roads safer. And what's really interesting is that if you look over the last 5 years, we have about 1.4 million fatalities on the world's roads today.
I'm sorry, how many?
1.4 million.
I mean, I should know this number, but it's a pretty depressing one. So.
It's a big number. And actually, there's tens of millions of injuries and other types of incidents that happen. And, it's important to understand that a lot of it doesn't just affect people who are driving, passengers. It also affects pedestrians, it affects bicyclists, it affects people running, it affects the entire world. The single biggest cause of death among people between the ages of 15 and 30 in most countries. And so it's kind of important to understand also that over the last 5 years, it actually has become a little bit worse compared to until about 2014. And the main reason for that, the attribution is really due to the smartphone. It's become an extension of our bodies. We, on average, in the US, we spend a few hours a day on our smartphone. Look at your screen time, you take the averages, it's somewhere between 3 to 4 hours a day. We're only awake 16 hours.
I mean, if it wasn't for the stage, I'm pretty sure mine would be on me still. Yeah. But I think there's a little bit of an irony, because what I hear you saying is that the smartphone is perhaps one of the biggest causes of fatalities. The smartphone is clearly the biggest cause of distracted driving. Sort of the incidences, while slightly lower, are more expensive of non-fatalities. And so I guess the irony for me is what I hear you saying is that we're going to use the mobile phone as a way to help actually improve behavior. So I have to ask, how is that possible?
That's right. I mean, so this was the hypothesis we had actually in 2009, 2010, just coming off of the recession, where that's when we got really interested in safety. And
this was at MIT as part of your research. Okay.
Right. And so there was a research project called Cartel, which I was leading with another professor, Sam Madden, who's our co-founder. And in 2009, we got connected with Bill Powers, who's our co-founder and CEO. And it's been a great partnership where I started really thinking about safety as a possibility because I was reading about the successes with the impact of black boxes in Europe and OBD devices that had just sort of started being deployed, and started looking at how to use these smartphones as a way to do mobile sensing on. This was way back when. And in 2010, we started the company on a $150,000 grant from the National Science Foundation. Your tax dollars at work. It's actually, I think.
So were they an equity holder, though, the National Science?
Okay. No. And so
that would have been good tax return, though. I mean, that would be a good, okay.
I think we're paying a lot in taxes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that we started off like that, and the hypothesis was that we could use these sensors on smartphones. Now, if you think back earlier to MIT, the MIT research days, in 2004, 2005 was when we started the Cartel project. And the hot phones on the market then were the Motorola Razr flip phone and the Nokia set of phones. And you couldn't write these apps that anybody could use, but being at MIT, we could connect with people at Motorola and Nokia. And actually, we were doing mobile sensing for a very long time. So for some of us in our company, this has been a really long haul. And 2012, we launched what today I would consider the first mobile UBI product. We partnered with some insurance companies, several of whom are actually here at this conference. And we've actually kind of grown quite rapidly over the last year. We've experienced a 2.3x growth. So it's time to utilize this investment and really grow this into a much bigger thing.
Well, it's hard not to want to continue to ask you sort of what happens when $500 million comes into the company, especially because I think you told me it was only 66 people at the time.
Yep.
So it's pretty impressive funding per head, I guess, if people actually track that. So, but Andreas is sitting there sort of like very patiently. So I do want to ask a little bit. We think about SoftBank Vision Fund, and we think about some of the investments that you've made. It looks like it's very long, right, on ride sharing and on delivery, and certainly on autonomy. So It's hard not to look at this and say there must be something else at play in your interest. It's not just it's a great financial bet.
No, absolutely right. And I think this, to put this in context, if you look at where we engaged with Hari and Bill, I think it's important to remember that it's not just telematics for the sake of changing the economics of insurance, but it's telematics for the purpose really of increasing road safety. And that's really like the primary concern if you look across all the ride sharing as well. So, to put this investment in context, of course, there is a desire to move faster with the original business, so to speak, right, in terms of private policies, and, just effectively be able to step on the gas and do things more in parallel than do it more serially. But absolutely, it's absolutely critical that we're able to leverage, the partnership we have within Softbank, all the ride-sharing assets, and look at how we can deploy the learnings from CMT to ultimately make all of these, modes of transportation safer. That's ultimately the goal. And that's all about telematics.
And I feel like that's what we see with SoftBank is a sort of cross-pollination. So, is there a timeline that you have for CMT? Do you see them as, wow, you could really help? It's, is it the autonomy mostly, and we're going to focus on the path to autonomy? Or is it really there's a huge amount of loss that happens in our investments in ride sharing and delivery, and frankly, we want to cut down those loss exposures? Is there what do you think about it?
No, I think it was literally from day minus 100 probably, right? So I think those discussions started extremely early on because the value is so tangible in a way. And also if you look at ride sharing in particular, right, take this as an example, it's a much more complicated structure than you just owning your car and driving your car. There is someone that may own the asset, someone that is driving the asset, someone else that is operating it, and then someone that's sitting in the back seat. And ultimately all of these parties are going to be interested in making sure that they're kept sound and safe. So I think being able to crack that problem is something that we definitely see within the horizon and something we've been working on for the last 6 months together with CMT.
Now, I do want to ask a question. You were an insurtech before the term was anything. And so if you think about kind of the success of the company, and there's a lot of other people in here that are saying, I've got a great product, I've got a great service, I cannot sell it into insurers. You know, like, do you have any advice, or from your sort of experience on doing that, what's been the biggest headwinds for you, and how much has changed in the last 4 years?
Right. So I think that we had an unusual story. Every startup, I think, has an unusual story, and we have an unusual story. We had not actually raised any venture funding until the Softbank Vision Fund. And what that meant was...
And I have to stop you, because that, I think, is crazy. So you weren't really out in the market, and you hadn't taken institutional money until this one. And I believe you had told me you were a profitable company, and so that's pretty crazy to hear.
Yeah, it's an old-fashioned company in that way, in that sense. It was focused on doing things that are useful for the world, for the users, for the drivers, and for our insurance partners, and focused really on understanding not just technology, which is something that we were good at coming out of our MIT roots, or even products, but really focusing on solutions that solve real problems, or problems that were likely to occur in the future for insurance companies. So I think we focused a lot on 3 C's, which are sort of our culture. One of them was collaboration. So, of course, everybody talks collaboration, and usually they mean internal collaboration. For us, it's collaboration with our partners and customers. The second C is customer commitment. I mean, that's how we grew. We grew with revenue. That's what allowed us to grow. We were profitable. We have been for a few years, and we're certainly profitable by the time of this investment. And we actually intend to retain that. So I'll get to what we're using the money for. And number 3 is creativity. We believe that, again, coming out of research and coming out of academia way back when, we now have the DNA to do things that can place bets not only over the next year or 2 or 3, but really sort of place longer-term bets over the next 5 to 7 years of the mobility ecosystem. And that's something where we share a vision of the future with Masa, Rajiv, Andreas, and the Softbank Vision Fund. So I think we, at least for us, our journey has been to really try to understand how to provide solutions to our insurance partners and obtain revenue, and then grow on that revenue. And then once we reach that point, we now believe that we've established a lot of the hypotheses for how telematics can work. But if you look worldwide, there's about 1.2 billion vehicles in the world today. A lot of people believe it's going to double or maybe exceed 2 billion over the next 10 to 15 years. But if you look seriously at how many have annualized, on an annualized basis, insurance telematics, my number estimate is about 50 million. And at CMT, we have a sizable fraction and a really fast-growing fraction of that set. But look at the gap between 50 million and 1.2 billion. It's big, and then we're looking at 2 billion in the future. So really, the purpose of this investment is to now invest in growth of this drivable program, focus on Claim Studio, and then look at what happens with Mobility 2.0, which is ride-sharing and the road to autonomy. And that's really the purpose of what we intend to do over the next few years.
No, so Andreas, I mean, I think there's 2 sides of the coin there. There's 50 going to at least 1.2 billion, maybe optimistically 2 billion, but then it's only 50, and it hasn't been, this is not a SaaS business. It's going to 100 next year, 200 the next year. So was there a point of the adoption curve of telematics where you were a little bit hesitant and said, maybe this isn't, sort of going to actually hit the penetration we think it will?
I do have to say it's a SaaS business.
Yeah, I was about to say it is. I mean, it is a very scalable business model. But I think to your point, Jay, I think the real kind of crux for us was to see that this is not just about putting people on the left or right hand side of a normal distribution and pricing things accordingly, which by the way is valuable on its own, right? But the fact that you can connect this back to the user and actually change the behavior, I think that's really where their power lies. So instead of just saying, I'm going to monitor this passively and take some decisions based on it, maybe you'll get some discounts, etc. That's great, but what really I think will change adoption and what will drive users to want to use this for themselves, their families, etc., is the fact that you can actually demonstrate that people become better and safer drivers, right? And I think that's extremely easy to get behind.
I certainly wouldn't mind if that's the case. I could use a lot of improvement if you ask my wife. She will tell you that. It's true. But I do wonder, today when we think about the state of telematics, there's a fair amount of long-haul trucking. And then what we see from a consumer side, though, it's endless commercials on saving money. I think if we asked people about, sort of well, they wouldn't even know what telematics is. And if you ask them about, this other version, right, it's saving money. Like, are you going to help us, like, kind of free us of this paradigm?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a place where I think many of the U.S. insurers are are able to learn from things abroad, just like people abroad are able to learn from things in the U.S. One of the advantages of that we bring to the table is we work in 25 countries. So I think there are international learnings to be had. But I do believe that it's changing. There's a lot more focus on end consumer services. Some people call them value-added services. I actually don't think of them as a value-add. I think that that's actually what you want your consumers to be using. And I believe that better pricing is an example of a value add that an insurer can obtain. So examples are family sharing. We've been rolling that out with a number of insurers, with teen drivers who might get rewards for good driving, and then the parents are the policy holders. Because a discount as such doesn't work for a teen driver. I have a 17-year-old. She started driving. She is not the worst driver in our family.
I was about to ask you. I mean, I'm sure you're tracking this.
I don't call it tracking. What we do is...
you didn't like when I called what you do behavior modification either.
It's not behavior modification either, right? It's incentives. But at the same time, she tracks my driving too, and we have a friendly competition, and it's set up so there's rewards that are provided. And what's really interesting is that many of the improvements that we observe there are actually greater than the improvements you might observe in a more traditional discount program for much less actual cost. And so another example of something that really has worked is crash detection and roadside assistance services. And then from the insurer standpoint and the end user standpoint, we're very excited about Claims Studio because it reduces the claim cycle time. You can pre-populate a claims database, so when somebody calls in or goes to their mobile, all that information is available. So you can focus on, are you okay, as opposed to how fast were you going, where are you driving, what lane were you in? Because the fact is, I don't know how fast I was going when I got into a crash. All I know is the answer has to be under the speed limit. And so it's just not really the right question to be asking. So I do believe there's these value-added services that people can benefit from, and consumers will move from using it because it's a transactional process, they get a discount, to something that they want to have. And we've actually had consumers who tell us, we see ratings on the App Store for some of the apps, they're really, really good. And I think consumers are also telling us and telling our partners that for the first time in a long time, they're actually experiencing a mobile experience with an insurance product that they actually kind of like and they enjoy.
I mean, I certainly thought when you told me that part of the platform was, not just detection, but trying to then go that next step, or, how do you get towing? I mean, I've been really bullish. Caribou's really bullish on APIs, and I've been really bullish on, what is that other holistic interactions that you have? So I thought that was a, sort of a nice touch there.
We've had real-time impact alert with Roadside Assistance live since 2015. Very difficult problems because you need to get all of the crashes that require towing and very low false positive rate. Incredibly difficult, and we've been at it for several years.
I mean, I bet you have some great stories of like the false positives where you thought it was a crash initially. Yeah, it wasn't. Sorry, Andreas.
No, I just wanted to say on this whole point of having the right partnerships and actually the foresight of what we see in the US, for example, with insurers. I think it is really important to remember that CMT cannot kind of innovate in isolation, right? It really comes down to the partners wanting to do this as well, and really coming back to the thing I said in the beginning. Without those partnerships, I think it's incredibly difficult, no matter how smart you may be, to actually be able to change these behaviors. So, again, right, I mean, I have to really do a hat off to the insurers that are able to push this agenda and help explore with us to, how to change this message really and get broader adoption.
Absolutely.
Now, I mean, I think one question, because it's very easy, I mean, mobile telematics is an inherently P&C, sort of like topic. But it sounds like the behavior, what is it? Not behavior modification, the incentives? Is that what it does? Okay.
Safe drivers are made, not born.
Safe drivers are made. Yeah, I mean, maybe they should give people the driving test with their phone because you're going to be using it anyway, so you might as well see. No, bad idea, I know. But I guess what lessons from sort of the incentives? Because you've had some real success of getting what sounds like Mission Impossible, a teenager to drive more safely. And so what lessons can we learn there? From the data and that might apply to other industries, especially, in life and health.
Right. What we've learned is, I would say two things. The first one is one size doesn't fit all, and one size doesn't fit all even for the same person over time. And what gets people to do things and want to improve changes with time. So I think that's kind of a key key lesson and something that we're very heavily invested in, and really working with our partners and sharing best practices, learning from them, and so on. That's the first. And the second aspect of this is that user engagement is kind of key. So a lot of our focus in where we see mobile telematics going is with user engagement. Now, it's also important that the data be accurate, certainly accurate enough, and users perceive it as being good. And we're a mobile-centric product. We have an app-only solution built on a software development kit, and we have an app and tag solution. It's a small device that you attach to the windshield. It's a 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter device you attach to the windshield, and about half of our users have that, and half don't. And this gives us, I would say, a unique and unfair advantage, because a lot of the users who use the app and tag also give us app data. So that improves the accuracy, because we get real-time data every day. That improves the accuracy of the app-only program. So there's a lot greater consumer confidence in the quality of the results that are being shown. And we believe strongly in complete transparency to the user, that by showing them a lot of information, sort of as granular as they can, as they keep going through the app, you improve user engagement. And in some of our partner success stories, we've seen that engaged drivers have 47% fewer claims. And in fact, overall in the book of business, we found that with just these rewards and incentives, you can reduce fatalities and severe crashes by 60%. That's an example of a great success story.
Now, Glenn Shapiro earlier talked a little bit about the idea of a driving score. This idea, and I know, Andreas, you've been particularly bullish on something other than, say, FICO as an indicator. Mm-hmm. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about the driving score, but I was intrigued by something Glenn said, which was the idea that what happens, does that driving score, who does that belong to? Because does that mean that at some point you inadvertently create a marketplace where people are shopping for themselves?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there are many ways in which the future could evolve. There's certainly a lot of people looking at driving scores. Our own philosophy here is to really work in very close partnership with our insurance partners and customers. And we have scores for telematics that have been with mobile that have been filed and approved in 29 states and more coming. But the intent here is not for us to we're not selling that score or marketing that score unless there are insurers who come in and say, we just want to use your score, or we want a Me Too filing. We're equally happy working in close partnership with our insurers, where we take aspects of our score and have them use it, or if they want to do more of that, they can do it. It's a little hard. I don't have a real strong opinion on the future here as to whether someone will come up with a score that people market around, but it's a good question, and we'll have to see how it unfolds.
So your score is not, you don't see the sort of this plan where you're going to become the FICO and it's pinged for others, and it sort of leaves the confines of your clients today.
It's a little hard to predict the future. I mean, at this point, we're focused on making our insurers really successful, because they have millions of users in their book of business, and we're at the starting point of the success of mobile-based telematics, mobile telematics. So our goal is very focused on helping them grow, both with this drivable platform for risk and with the Claims Studio piece. And in terms of the future, our focus is on improving rideshare safety and insurance, and on understanding the road to autonomy. So that's, even when you have what I would call significant resources, you still need to have a strong focus, and that's our focus.
And I mean, that's where you really start to see the effects of having these insights, right? So as you build this platform out across more and more drivers, with that data, you refine the insights with additional machine learning, etc. Then you refine the product, and hopefully with a refined product, you get more data, and off you go, right? And I think this is where, as you get into autonomy, for example, you'll be in a very, very strong position to be able to say, what actually constitutes good behavior, and how should we think about, the behavior that, some of these more autonomous vehicles are ultimately going to take, right?
I should also say that when you get to the autonomous world, part of our plan over the next 7 years or so is, in an autonomous world, insurance is going to be completely based on telematics, because it's going to boil down to evaluating the quality of the sensed data, the quality of the machine learning and reinforcement learning, and the quality of the software. So it sort of won't really matter, I think, what your credit score is or some of these other factors.
That's your big, bold prediction, so I'm going to say it again.
You want me to say it again?
Yes.
Yeah, insurance in an autonomous world, as we head on that road to autonomy, is going to boil down to all telematics, evaluating the quality of the sensed data, the quality of the machine learning and reinforcement learning, and the quality of software. And there's some people who believe that autonomy will completely eliminate all crashes. I think that's very optimistic, because if you believe that, you also then believe that sensors are perfect, that machine learning is infallible, and software is 100% reliable. I think those are very unlikely to be true. And even sensors, it's fundamentally impossible to build perfect quality sensors. So I do think observable technologies and understanding of how the data and the response, the control systems in these autonomous vehicles react are important to understand. So I think it's going to be completely based on telematics, and that's the future over the next 7 to 10 years that we're headed toward.
Wonderful. Well, as we conclude here, we saw Stuart Miller talk about Max, Simkoff, and he said, the industry needs change, and you are the agent for change. So, Andreas, I'm going to put you on the spot and say, what would you like to say, to Hari here?
In terms of?
Just something nice and encouraging about him in the industry.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean...
Don't lose my money.
No, well, that's number one. No, I think knock it out of the park, right? Mobility overall is already $5 trillion TAM, right? So there's a very big playground here to go out and help increase the overall safety level. So really just knock it out of the park and keep up the good work.
Well, and I'm impressed because, as much as we try to sort of shake Hari, he promised me he'd say some things that were not quite right, didn't happen. And, but you have an amazing ability to think about the end goal here of making roads better. And I know it sounds cliche and it's a thing you're supposed to say, but I've gotten to know you a little bit and you truly believe that. So it's actually very, very nice to hear. So allow us, please give a round of applause. Thank you so much for Andreas Hansson and Hari.